summer of 1986 was for the most part pretty typical. I was 10 years old at the time, so we were doing things that 10-year-old boys love to do, like swimming, riding around on our bikes, and playing Little League games. The area I grew up in was very rural, populated mostly by farmers and their kids. The nearest town was Deweese, with a population of under 100, and while it didn't have much to offer for kids to do, we usually didn't have a hard time making our own fun. One Friday, me, my friends, Kevin, Mike, and Scott, decided to walk the train tracks that went out of the town. Already familiar with what was down the tracks to the east, we decided to explore the western stretch. The tracks leading west out of town were far more raw, as they cut through tree-lined valleys and extended for miles, with the trees forming a canopy that made it feel more like a tunnel than a path. About 2 miles down the tracks, we came across an old, run-down house, about 100 meters from the tracks. There was no apparent roads leading to it, just which led us to think it was probably an old abandoned farmhouse. The house was badly in need of maintenance. Flaky paint and broken boards on the porch. However, there were strong feelings that someone still lived there, and was probably not at home as when we stumbled upon it. We entered the house. It was as run down on the outside that it was on the inside. It was run down on the inside as well as the outside. The furniture was very old, rips and scratches. The air was a slight smell of smoke, not like cigarettes or cigars, but more like a fireplace, though I didn't see a fireplace or any fire-burning stoves inside. The wallpaper had faded and peeled away. The plasters of the wall were pulled away from the plaster of the wall. Lots of knickknacks were on display on the shelves and curio cupboards. Being the mischievous boys we were, Scott grabbed a vase from the shelf and smashed it on the floor. Nervous laughter erupted. Following the brief pause, before Mike and Kevin joined in on the juvenile vandalism. I was stunned to see how freely my friends were destroying stuff, so I panicked and ran from the house. Thinking someone lives there or owns that stuff, I didn't want to get in trouble. An hour later I arrived home. Saturday morning I woke up, enjoyed my cartoons and cereal like I did every Saturday morning. However, I couldn't shake the guilt of what my friends did to that house. After lunch I reluctantly ran my way back to the house and knocked on the door. A few moments passed before I saw an old woman come to the door. "Hello there, young man. Can I help you?" I replied, yeah, ma'am. Me and my friends were here last night, and they broke some of your things. I wanted to apologize." The old woman replied, "Ah, yes. I caught the 3 boys in the act. Anyway, it's really not that important. It shows a lot of character that you came back to apologize. My name is Maggie. Would you like to come inside and visit for a few minutes?" I agreed and entered the house. From what I could tell, the house was being cleaned up, following our rampage. I even noticed that the vase Scott smashed was sitting back where I'd seen it the night before. She must have had another stashed away or something. We sat in the living room, and she asked me the typical kind of questions, my interests, etc., my name, my interests, etc. A few minutes of mental pleasantries passed before she said, "Now, where are my manners? Would you like some milk and cookies?" Naturally, I took her up on the offer. As she left the kitchen, I realized I completely forgot about my baseball game. Later that afternoon, bolting from the chair, I told the woman, "I'm sorry, but I forgot about my baseball game this afternoon. I'm sorry, but I forgot about my baseball game this afternoon, and I'm going to be late. I'll come back another day." Before she could protest, I'm already out the door, heading back towards home. Again, I found myself running away from the house for the second time in 2 days. I made it home, just in time to leave for a baseball game. We had to forfeit since my friends didn't show up. They must have been grounded because, or after getting caught for Maggie and she tattled to their parents about the vandalism. After spending more time thinking about it, after spending more time thinking about how I left the day before, I started to feel guilty for leaving the old woman so abruptly, so I decided to unburden myself with my dad. I explained what I have done, and how I had gone back to apologize. My dad looked at me with an unconvincing smirk. Sure you did. You were in Crazy Maggie's house, except that about 40 years ago, an angry mom had barricaded her in that house, and then burnt it to the ground, after bodies of 7 missing children were found and buried on her property. My eyes widened, and my eyes widened in the combination of terror and disbelief. Perhaps my dad was just messing with me, but I pleaded for him for about 20 minutes that I was telling the truth, frustrated with my tendency. Dad said, You can still see the graves where each body was discovered. Let's go, I'll show you. Reluctantly I agreed, and we arrived at the house roughly an hour later. To my surprise, it's exactly as my dad said. The house was no longer there, only the foundations and a burnt and rotted frame remained. Did I imagine the whole thing? My dad told me about the history of the house, the tragic story of the grisly murders. He beckoned me back behind the house and pointed to where bodies were discovered. We rounded the corner, and he spent a few moments inspecting them more closely. That's odd, my dad said. I thought there were only 7 murders, but I count 10 graves.